He shuffled down aisle 7, only to hear his groceries clatter to the floor, until a suited figure ushered in an avalanche of goodwill. 82-year-old Arthur Jenkins, a man whose spine still held the ghost of parade ground rigidity, despite decades of bending to civilian life, pushed his battered shopping cart across the slick linoleum of the pre-dawn supermarket. The fluorescent lights hummed above, a sterile drone that barely pierced the weary silence. Each wheel of the cart squeaked a mournful rhythmic complaint, a counterpoint to the quiet scuff of his worn sneakers. His breath misted faintly in the chilled air of the produce section, a testament to the early hour and the meager heating. He gripped the cold metal handle, knuckles white, the familiar ache in his shoulders a constant companion, a relic from the countless rucksacks and rifle slings he'd shouldered in distant, forgotten lands. His eyes, faded blue like old denim, scanned the shelves for the familiar, affordable staples, a bag of rice, a couple of cans of tuna, perhaps some dried beans. Just enough to last the week, just enough to keep the wolves from the door. He wasn't looking for luxury, merely sustenance. The store was almost empty, a hushed cavern of shadowed aisles and towering displays, perfect for a man who preferred to shop without drawing attention, to merge with the quiet hum of the early morning. A faint clatter echoed from aisle 9, a single can of diced tomatoes rolling from a shelf, the sound magnified in the pre-dawn quiet. Arthur flinched, a slight tremor running through his thin frame. He hated drawing attention, a habit ingrained during years when being noticed often meant trouble. He steadied his cart, his gaze returning to a discounted bag of lentils, calculating the cost against the few crumpled bills in his wallet. Every penny counted, every purchase a carefully considered trade-off. His pension, meager as it was, stretched thin as a worn thread, barely covering the rising cost of living. The chill from the open freezer doors seeped into his bones, reminding him of mornings spent in foxholes, the cold a more familiar, more unforgiving presence. He shivered, pulling his threadbare jacket tighter around him, the rough fabric chafing against his skin. He moved towards the checkout, the weight of the few items in his tote bag, a familiar comfort, a small victory against the encroaching uncertainty. The self-checkout machines glowed like silent sentinels, their screens beckoning with promises of swift, impersonal transactions. Arthur preferred the human touch, but the lines at the single open register were already forming, even at this ungodly hour. He sighed, adjusting the strap of his worn canvas tote bag over his shoulder. The bag, faded and stained, had seen better days, much like himself. It had carried everything from library books to the occasional bottle of cheap wine over the years. Today it held his carefully chosen groceries, each item a small monument to frugality and resilience. A rough voice barked, "Move on, old man." The words sliced through the quiet, sharper than the squeal of a faulty conveyor belt. Arthur, startled, turned to see a burly security guard, uniform stretched tight across a thick chest, his face a mask of bored impatience. The guard gestured brusquely towards the self-checkout. "These lanes are for paying customers, not for loitering." Arthur's grip tightened on the tote bag. "Loitering? I'm buying groceries, just like everyone else." The injustice of the accusation burned, a hot coal in his chest. He felt his cheeks flush, a wave of familiar shame washing over him, the kind that often accompanies the indignities of old age and dwindling resources. "I'm just checking out," Arthur mumbled, his voice a low rasp, barely audible. He took a step towards the self-checkout, trying to navigate the unfamiliar technology, his fingers fumbling with the scanner. The guard, however, was already moving, a hulking shadow looming over him. A powerful hand clamped down on Arthur's shoulder, a grip like iron. "You heard me. Move it. If you're not going to pay, get out." The shove was sudden, brutal, and utterly unexpected. It caught Arthur off balance, his weakened knees buckling. The world tilted. Before we continue with the story, be sure to let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments. We love learning about our viewers. Now let's get back to the story. The canvas tote bag, already strained, slipped from his grasp, Time seemed to slow, each falling item a separate, agonizing event. The thud of the 2-pound bag of pinto beans hitting the slick linoleum echoed first, a dull, resonant sound. Then came the frantic rattling of soda cans as they tumbled from the bag, rolling wildly under the harsh fluorescent glare, one crashing into a shelf, another spinning precariously close to a customer's foot. A clear plastic bottle of cheap cooking oil, its lid slightly loose, ruptured on impact, spreading a slick, viscous puddle across the gleaming floor. His worn jacket, already thin, quickly soaked up the leaking oil, a dark stain blossoming across the fabric. A can of peaches, its colorful label a stark contrast to the sterile environment, spun across the floor and skittered under a display rack. A box of instant oatmeal burst open, scattering powdery flakes like cynical confetti across the polished tiles, mingling with the dark, spilled coffee grounds from a punctured bag. The faint aroma of bleach, already present in the store, now mixed with the acrid smell of stale coffee and the cloying sweetness of spilled oil, a nauseating cocktail that stung Arthur's nostrils. He stared, wide-eyed, at the chaotic spread, a silent scream building in his throat. My week's food. All of it, gone. A few scattered customers, drawn by the sudden commotion, paused their own hurried purchases. Their eyes, fleeting and judgmental, flickered from the spilled groceries to Arthur, then quickly away. There were no offers of help, no genuine expressions of concern, only a few half-hearted apologies mumbled under their breath as they skirted the widening mess. Oh dear, what a shame. The words were empty, devoid of true empathy, evaporating into the vast, indifferent space of the supermarket. Arthur felt their gazes, sharp and accusatory, piercing through him. I carried their burdens abroad, now I can't carry my own groceries. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on him, heavier than any pack he'd ever humped through a jungle. He crouched, his old knees protesting with a painful groan, trying to gather the scattered remnants of his dignity along with his ruined food. His rough palm brushed against the spilled sugar, sticky and gritty, then recoiled from the spreading oil. The fluorescent glare sang off the overturned cartons, mocking his helplessness. The security guard, oblivious to the quiet devastation he had wrought, merely grumbled, "Clean that up, old man, and next time, pay attention." He turned on his heel, his heavy boots thudding away, leaving Arthur alone in the wreckage of his morning, a silent, desperate figure amidst the gleaming, indifferent aisles, the clang of tin cans drumming in his chest. The video, shot on a shaky smartphone by an anonymous shopper, began its inexorable crawl across social media feeds, a silent, damning indictment. It showed the immediate aftermath, Arthur, hunched and frail, attempting to scoop spilled rice into his oil-stained tote bag, his movements slow and pained. The bright, unforgiving lights of the supermarket highlighted the tremor in his hands, the utter despair etched on his face. The caption, short and sharp, simply read, "Elderly veteran assaulted by security guard at supermart this morning." The words resonated with raw indignation, sparking a firestorm of outrage that quickly consumed the digital ether. Every pixel of the low-resolution footage screamed of fragile hurt, of a quiet dignity systematically dismantled. The online world, often a cesspool of vitriol, momentarily unified in a wave of dawning hope that justice might somehow prevail. Whispers of the viral clip reached the breakfast tables, then the coffee breaks, and finally the executive suites, spreading faster than the news reports could confirm. Screenshots of Arthur's stooped shoulders, his weathered face, became avatars for a collective sense of injustice. The sheer, unflinching realism of the incident, stripped of any melodrama, seized attention with a terrifying grip. The raw indignation swelled, a tidal wave of public outcry demanding accountability. Each shared post, each angry comment, amplified the veteran's vulnerability, a stark contrast to the store's sterile efficiency. The online comment sections, usually rife with division, were uncharacteristically unanimous. Disgraceful, unacceptable, find this man. Arthur, meanwhile, oblivious to the digital maelstrom he had inadvertently ignited, continued his slow, solitary sweep of the floor. The security guard had vanished, leaving him to face the scattered remains of his groceries. His knees protested with every stoop, a dull ache that resonated with the deeper throb of humiliation. He managed to salvage a few items, mostly dry goods that hadn't been contaminated by the oil. A bag of rice, a couple of untouched cans, their labels miraculously clean. He pushed them into his still damp tote, the wet fabric clinging unpleasantly to his fingers. The faint aroma of bleach still mingled with the stale coffee and the cloying sweetness of spilled oil, a constant reminder of the morning's bitter events. Each retrieved item felt like a tiny, insignificant victory in a losing battle. As he slowly pushed his almost empty cart towards the exit, his movements stiff and deliberate, the few customers who remained in the store recoiled, their glances a mix of pity and discomfort. No one offered to help. No one met his gaze. He could feel the weight of their unspoken judgment, the silent accusations that he was somehow a burden, a disruption to their pristine morning routine. The cold, sterile air of the supermarket seemed to amplify his isolation, wrapping around him like a shroud. He heard a young woman whisper, "Poor old man," and another reply, "Serves him right for trying to shoplift, probably." The words, though unintended for his ears, struck him like physical blows, each syllable chipping away at his already fragile pride. Shoplift? After serving my country, after all I've given? His head held high, though his shoulders stooped beneath years of service and fresh disgrace. Arthur pushed through the sliding doors, stepping out into the pale light of dawn. The air outside was cold, crisp, and offered a fleeting reprieve from the oppressive artificiality of the store. He just wanted to go home, to retreat into the quiet solitude of his small apartment, to lick his wounds in private. The world outside, however, was already shifting. He noticed a few people gathered near the entrance, their phones held aloft, pointed in his direction. He heard snippets of excited chatter, phrases like, "That's him," and "the veteran from the video." A knot of dread tightened in his stomach. The humiliation, he realized with a sinking heart, was not confined to the supermarket floor. It had followed him out, a persistent shadow. He quickened his pace, a desperate, fumbling attempt to outrun the sudden, unwelcome attention. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anxiety. He just wanted to disappear, to become invisible, as he had so often wished for in the lonely, anonymous days of his retirement. He ignored the pointing fingers, the hushed murmurs, the flashing camera phones. His gaze remained fixed on the cracked pavement ahead, each step a testament to his fading resolve. The air, initially a relief, now felt heavy, charged with an unsettling energy. He felt exposed, vulnerable, like an exhibit in a cruel public display. He felt the weight of their collective curiosity, a burden almost as heavy as his shattered groceries. Then, a new sound cut through the growing hum of the burgeoning crowd, the distinct, powerful purr of a high-end engine. It grew steadily louder, a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath his feet. Arthur, despite his desire to escape, couldn't help but glance up. A sleek, black car, long and gleaming, glided into view, its tinted windows reflecting the pale morning light. It was a vehicle of immense luxury, utterly out of place in the mundane landscape of a suburban supermarket parking lot. The polished chrome of its grille shimmered. The limousine pulled up to the curb with an almost imperceptible whisper of tires on asphalt. Directly in front of the sliding doors Arthur had just exited. Its polished surface gleamed under the nascent sun, an intimidating presence. A hush fell over the small crowd, their phone cameras momentarily forgotten. The driver, a figure in a dark suit, emerged from the front, his movements precise and professional. He opened the rear passenger door with a soft click, revealing a glimpse of the plush interior. A collective intake of breath rippled through the onlookers, a silent acknowledgement of the power and prestige emanating from the vehicle. A man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, stepped out of the back seat. His posture was ramrod straight, his silver hair neatly combed, his expression one of calm, unyielding authority. A discreet earpiece nestled in his ear. His cufflink, a glinting shard of silver, caught the overhead lights from the store, flashing like a beacon. He surveyed the scene, his gaze sweeping over the scattered onlookers, the still damp patch on the linoleum visible through the glass doors, and finally settling on Arthur. His eyes, though assessing, held a flicker of something else, a dawning comprehension, perhaps even a nascent spark of indignation, the hum of drones slicing the morning hush. The CEO, Julian Vance, a man whose name was synonymous with innovation and ruthless efficiency in the retail world, strode past the stunned staff, his polished shoes making almost no sound on the freshly mopped floor. His arrival had been abrupt, unannounced, a seismic event that had rattled the very foundations of the morning shift. His gaze, sharp and analytical, swept over the chaos, taking in the wide-eyed employees, the still scattered remnants of Arthur's ruined groceries, and the lingering scent of spilled oil and bleach. The air crackled with tension, a palpable fear emanating from the store manager who stood frozen, his face ashen. Vance's presence filled the vast space, radiating an aura of decisive compassion, a stark contrast to the earlier indifference. His very stride exuded a quiet heroism, an unexpected force of nature descending upon the mundane. He stopped directly beside Arthur, who still stood by the exit, a bewildered sentinel to his own misfortune. Vance's voice, when he spoke, was a low, measured whisper, yet it carried an undeniable command that cut through the lingering buzz of the crowd outside. "Not on my watch." The words were not a question, nor a statement of anger, but a quiet, absolute decree. He turned slightly, addressing his two assistants, who materialized almost instantly at his side, their faces impassive but ready. "Empty aisle 7, every single shelf, and every single pantry in Mr. Jenkins' home is to be stocked for a year. Quality, not just quantity. Start immediately." His instructions were delivered with the precision of a military commander, leaving no room for argument or hesitation. The pronouncement sent a ripple of disbelief through the assembled onlookers and the few remaining store employees. Aisle 7, a vast expanse of canned goods and dry staples, stretched before them, a monument to the store's inventory. The idea of emptying it, of transferring its entire contents to a single man's pantry, was audacious, almost fantastical. But Vance's tone brooked no argument. His assistants, accustomed to his sudden grand gestures, immediately pulled out their tablets, their fingers flying across the screens, already coordinating the logistical nightmare of such an undertaking. The store manager, still pale, stammered, "Mr. Vance, sir, are you sure?" The CEO's gaze, cool and unwavering, silenced him instantly. "Quite sure, and ensure Mr. Jenkins receives the highest level of respect and care." Arthur, meanwhile, stood rooted to the spot, his mind struggling to process the rapid turn of events. One moment, he was a humiliated old man, his weak sustenance destroyed. The next, he was the recipient of an almost unbelievable act of generosity. "Aisle 7, my pantry, for a year." The words seemed to hang in the air, surreal and dreamlike. He felt a strange mixture of disbelief and a fragile, nascent hope. His initial instinct was to protest, to refuse such an overwhelming gift, but the unwavering certainty in Vance's eyes, the quiet authority, made him pause. He saw not pity, but respect, a recognition of the indignity he had suffered. Within minutes, the store sprang to life with a renewed, frenetic energy. A team of employees, spurred by a sense of urgency, began to systematically empty aisle 7. Cans of rice and canned soup clattered into industrial-sized trolleys. Boxes of pasta, bags of flour, and jars of preserves were carefully stacked. The once orderly shelves rapidly transformed into gaping voids, a testament to the CEO's sweeping command. The rattling of soda cans and the thud of larger items echoed through the store, a stark contrast to the earlier quiet. The fluorescent glare seemed to gleam brighter off the rapidly emptying shelves, reflecting the sudden, unexpected light in Arthur's own world. Outside, the sleek black limousine now had its trunk and back seats open, being meticulously loaded with the first wave of groceries. The driver, assisted by store employees, packed each item with careful precision, ensuring no damage. The crowd, still gathered, watched in stunned silence, their phones now lowered, their expressions a mixture of awe and dawning understanding. The initial whispers of outrage had morphed into murmurs of admiration. This wasn't just about replacing spilled groceries, this was about a profound public act of restorative justice, a visible declaration that some lines simply could not be crossed. The hum of drones slicing the morning hush began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of collective witness. Arthur, his eyes still wide with disbelief, found himself being gently guided towards the limousine by one of Vance's assistants. He was offered a warm cup of coffee, then a comfortable seat in the back of the car. The leather felt impossibly soft, the silence within the vehicle a stark contrast to the organized chaos outside. He watched through the tinted window as his future pantry filled up, item by item. He saw the security guard from earlier, now standing in the distance, his face ashen, being spoken to in hushed, urgent tones by another executive. Justice, slow and methodical, was being served. Julian Vance, after ensuring the loading was proceeding smoothly, returned to Arthur. He extended a hand, his grip firm and warm. "Mr. Jenkins," he said, his voice softer now, "it is an honor to rectify this injustice. Your service to our country is invaluable, and it will not be dishonored in my establishments." Arthur, tears stinging his eyes, found his voice, a rough, emotional whisper. "Sir, you don't have to." Vance merely smiled, a genuine, compassionate smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Indeed, I do. It is the least I can do." The journey to Arthur's small apartment was swift and silent. The limousine pulled up to the curb, a jarring sight in his modest neighborhood. A team of movers, already assembled, began to unload the car with quiet efficiency, carrying box after box of groceries into his apartment. His tiny kitchen, usually sparsely stocked, began to fill with an abundance he hadn't seen in decades. Cans of tuna, bags of pasta, boxes of cereal, fresh produce, an endless supply, a tangible manifestation of Vance's promise. The faint aroma of bleach from the store was replaced by the clean scent of fresh food, a scent of hope. Finally, the last box was carried in. The movers stepped back, their task complete. Arthur stood in his now overflowing kitchen, a landscape of provisions stretching before him. Rice, canned soup, dried beans, fresh fruit, even a selection of high-quality meats filled his refrigerator and his previously bare cupboards. It was overwhelming, humbling. He walked slowly, his hand trembling slightly, towards a brand-new pantry door, installed just moments before by a swift crew of carpenters Vance had dispatched. It stood pristine, gleaming, a symbol of newfound security and dignity. He reached out, his weathered hand closing over the cool metal of the handle, his fingers brushing against the smooth, solid wood. The CEO's polished shoes pausing at the entrance,